well-loved classic, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And it has been around for a very long time, and it's, again, one of the best loved books of all time. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this book, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story just so we're all on the same page. So A Tale of Two Cities is about a guy named Sidney Carton. And Sidney Carton is not a very good person. He's essentially a drunk, he's a lowlife, he works for a lawyer, which automatically makes him a terrible person. And he simply doesn't do things very well. But he falls in love with a girl named Lucy Minette. Lucy Minette, unfortunately, is in love with another guy named Charles Darnay, who's pretty much the perfect person. Then, over the course of the French Revolution, Charles Darnay is captured, and he's going to be beheaded by the guillotine. Then Sidney Carton, who just coincidentally happens to look a lot like Charles Darnay, ends up going and takes Darnay's place. And so he ends up getting beheaded on the guillotine instead, so that Charles Darnay can go and live with Lucy Minette. Now again, this story has been around for a very long time. It's extremely popular, it's a classic book. And my question is, why do we enjoy this story so much? What is it that captivates us about the story of a drunk who ends up giving his life for a man named Charles Darnay? And nobody ever even knows that he's done it, because he just replaced himself with Charles Darnay, and he looks exactly like him. And I think that the reason that we enjoy this story so much is the wonder of the self-sacrifice of Sidney Carton. Because we look at that, and we all want to be like that. We want to be able to sacrifice ourselves for those around us. We want to be able to sacrifice ourselves for the ones we love. After all, Sidney Carton goes and he gives his life for Charles Darnay, even though Charles Darnay is the one who stole his love away from him. In fact, the only possible way for Sidney Carton to be able to live a life with the person he loves is for Charles Darnay to die. And yet, he gives his own life so that Darnay can continue living and Lucy can have the best life possible. And we all want to be like that. We want to love those around us and love our friends just like that. But that doesn't always happen. In fact, I think that we don't usually love people around us like that, even though we pretend that we do. So last year, I was at a debate tournament. And this tournament was my last chance to qualify for nationals that year. And so when I didn't make it, I was pretty devastated. But what made everything worse was that a really good friend of mine, unlike me, did really well. And then at the end of the tournament, I found out that despite all of my failures, I had managed to beat one of the best teams in the state. Then I went to go tell my friend my one little accomplishment, and his only reply was, "Well, that's great." And without even smiling, he went back to what he was doing. Now I know this sounds silly, but I had a hard time forgiving him for that one petty little betrayal. And I discovered that we think that we love those around us. We think that we would sacrifice ourselves for those around us, and then when the moment comes when we're tested, when we have to continue loving our friends, even though they've done something just a little bit petty, and suddenly we discover that our love was not as strong as we thought it was. We don't love people like Sidney Carton loves Lucy Minette and Charles Darnay, but we want to. And I think that the way that we are able to give love is to be loved first. There's a G.K. Chesterton quote that says, to become lovable, something first must be loved. And that means that we all must be loved before we're able to give love for other people. So I have a friend who happens to be the person who I talk to whenever I'm about to go into competitions. Because I'm an extremely competitive person, and I always worry about how I'm going to do when I go into competitions. Because I think that somehow my worth is based on how I do. And so I talk to this friend always whenever I'm nervous. And then his reply, whenever I'm going to go into a competition and I say I'm really nervous, he always tells me, "Sophie, you're going to do wonderful. Even if you don't, I'm still going to think you're amazing." And when he first started saying that, I didn't really care, and it didn't really affect the way that I went into competitions. But then eventually, after he said it over and over again, I started to believe him. And when I started to believe him, suddenly it didn't matter how I did. It didn't matter what my ranking was, it didn't matter what place I finished, because I knew that I was going to be loved by my friends and family, no matter what happened. So when we're loved like that, that's how we're able to give love to other people. That's how we're able to sacrifice ourselves, like Sidney Carton sacrifices himself for Charles Darnay. And the question is, how can we be loved like that? Where can we find this kind of love that allows us to love other people in so great a manner? And I think that it comes from God. See, the people around us, like I said earlier, we think that we love one another. We think that we do a really good job. And then when we're tested, we discover that we don't. So the only place to find true, deep, unconditional, never-ending love comes from God. See, God created us all, and He put us on earth. not just to let us survive on our own. He didn't just put us here and set the earth spinning and leave us to fend for ourselves. He put us here, and then he loved us so much that he sent his son to die for us. Just like Sophie Carton gave his life for Charles Darnay, gave his life for Lucy Manette, God loved us so much that he was executed in a very similar manner to how Sophie Carton was. So what I'd like to leave you with is the fact that you are free to love. You are free to go out and love the world and give everything of yourself to everyone, because you can know that God loves you more than you can ever possibly imagine. As the song goes, that I really enjoy, the lyrics of the song go, "There is no fear now. Let go and just be free. I will love you unconditionally." Thank you.